Now that we're tracking that, let's actually create a page where we can show the recently read books. And I'm going to do that by creating a controller and mapping it to a time leaf template. People are going to see this when they have logged in. This is kind of like the dashboard view, right? I need a controller so that I can fetch all these books and display them in a page. So I'm going to create a new package called home. And then I'm going to create a controller called home controller. Right? It's going to be a class. And then I'm going to create a public. This is going to return. I'm just going to call this home. And I'm going to create a home time leaf template, which is going to render all of those things. Now, what do I need to show over here? First, I need to see if the user is logged in. If the user is not logged in, well, we have to maybe show them the login page. If not, we show them this page, right? So what is the login page that we have here? If you go to templates, the login page is essentially index, right? So I'm going to either return index or return home, depending on whether the user is logged in or not. How do I find that out? Well, we have done this a couple of times already, which is looking at the principal, right? I'm going to go here, get the authentication principal, and put that as an argument here. And I'm also going to copy pretty much the same condition that we've been checking. So I go back here and put this thing here. So if the user is not logged in, well, actually, let me flip this over here. If principal is null, or the principal.get attribute of login is equal to null, then I'm going to return index, which is kind of like the login page, which is what user sees when they haven't logged in. However, if we do have an ID, if we have a logged in user, I'm going to get the login user, and now I have to return home. I'm going to be creating this home page where we show all of the things that the user has, read or interacted with. So for this, to get that information, because before I forget, I'm going to mark this as controller. And now to get the user's book information, I'm going to auto-wire that repository. The repository is books by user repository. I'm going to auto-wire books by user repository. And over here, I can fetch all the books by user. Now, do I want to do find all by ID? Now, there are a couple of problems with find all by ID. First of all, this method does not exist. The find all by ID on, like the default find all by ID method on the Cassandra repository expects an iterable of string. It's basically expecting you to pass in multiple IDs and then return the elements that it finds for those IDs, right? Which is not what we want. The second thing is that we don't want to get all of the books for a given ID, right? Let's say user has read maybe 10 books or 50 books or 100 books. We don't want to get all of that records from the books by user table. We want only the most recent 50 books, okay? So in order to do this, you can leverage the pageable feature of fetching data from Cassandra repository, okay? So if I go to the repository here, I can create my own method here and say, I want this to be a pageable method, right? So I'm going to define a find all by ID, okay? And I'm going to provide an overload over here, right? So I have the default one, which is like when I type this, you see that autocomplete suggested takes iterable IDs, right? This is not what I want. I want something that takes a string ID and a pageable from data domain, all right? So what I get back over here is going to be what's called a slice, okay? Cassandra returns a slice of the data. With Cassandra, pagination is a little bit tricky because you don't get to switch between pages and say, okay, I want like the 10th page, give me data for the 10th page. Well, Cassandra doesn't know that because it's a distributed database, because Cassandra will require to calculate what the starting point is. And for big data, the size of data that Cassandra manages, we don't want to do this. And the reasons are pretty similar to why you don't want to sort at runtime when we are fetching data. We want that to be prepared. So the way Cassandra's pagination works is it always starts from the beginning, and then you kind of paginate one by one, start from page 0 and onwards, so that Cassandra can reasonably manage the performance for your pages. So the response that you're going to get back is what's referred to as a slice. All right. Slice is also from Org Spring Framework data domain. And this is a slice of the data that you would expect. Right. So this is a generic type, and each slice is of type books by user. Okay. So this is how you get a slice of the data, a page of the data. You just call it slice, but basically the idea is the same, right? It's a bunch of books by user records, right? It's a collection of books by user records, and you get that by doing the find by ID. Again, this is not a method that's available in the repository by default. You can set it here and say, I want pageable access to this table, provided, that's backing this repository. And I want a find by ID where I'm passing the ID and I'm also passing the pageable. Give me back a slice of this entity, which is the books by user. I'm going to define this in the repository. I don't have to provide the implementation because, again, with Spring Data Repository, the method signature itself informs what it needs to do, right? That's why we can get by with just having an interface here. So now that I have this, I can go back to my home controller and say, find all by user ID. And now the first argument is the user ID. Now the second argument is going to be a pageable instance, all right? So the pageable instance that we need to create is a Cassandra page instance, all right? So there is a special class called Cassandra page request, okay? Cassandra page request has a static auth method, which takes in, this one will do, right? The page number and then the size of the page. Again, like I mentioned, Cassandra expects you to start from the beginning. You cannot say start from like the 10th page or the 15th page. Right, so I'm going to start from page 0, and then I'm going to say, give me the first 100 records or the first 50 records, right? I'm going to get this, and then I'm going to assign this to a local variable, which is a slice of books by user. Okay, now I have this here. How do I get data out of it? Let me call this books slice. Now, book slice has a method to get that content out, which is literally called get content. So I'm going to do get content, and this is going to be a list. So actually, let me see what this type is. Yep, it is a list of books by user, right? So I'm going to call this books by user. And now I can set this on the model. I'm going to put a model here. Again, the usual stuff that you would need to do, just rinse and repeat, model.add attribute of books is books by user. And then I'm going to return home. All right. So the user is not logged in. We show index. The user is logged in. We show home. Now I need to go create that home template in my templates folder. Going to copy, paste, and call this home.html, right? Better reads. And then maybe this would be like a H1. My books, I'm not worrying too much about styling here. What I want to do is do a th:\each and print out those books by the user, right? So I'm going to go back to search to pick an example th:\each. This is going to be a div th:\each. And then here, I'm going to change this to whatever we are passing. We are passing books. Okay, so this is going to be book in books. Let me just add an H1. Actually, let me copy over, get a bootstrap. I'm going to get a card with the thing on the side this time. All right, so kind of similar to what we did for the book. Something like this would be perfect. I'm going to copy this, paste this here. I'm going to remove the max width because we don't want max width. We want it to expand to the size of, well, the available size really. And then this is going to be th text equals $curly book dot name. All right. I'm not doing anything else. I'll just leave it as is. I want to see if it prints those things right here, right? So if I reload, okay, so I get the login page here. I'm going to log in. And now when I refresh, it doesn't quite work because I probably haven't mapped it to a URL. Well, there you go. So I'm going to have to map this to /, all right? And to get mapping of /. This is going to map this to a / so that when the / is hit, it is going to run through this logic. Without this, it wasn't even executing the method on the controller that we had just created. All right, let's try this again. It is having a problem with templates home.html. Looks like book.name is not found. So let's see what's the name that we've given. It's called book name. All right, so let's go to home.html and change this to book name. Reload, and now we see the name of the books that I have been messing with, right? These are the books that I've been messing with. Now, all we need to do is add the other values here. Now, what do we have for, I'm going to close others, and I'm going to open books by user. What do we have here? We have the book name, the author name, cover IDs. So if I go to home controller, now for each of these book by user, I can map it to a single book with the cover ID replaced. Okay, so I'm going to say books by user, create a stream that map of a book to a book.get cover ID, get of 0. Well, actually, let me copy over the logic that I had in the other place. Book controller, I'm going to get this guy here and paste it here in the map logic. Okay. And I'm going to get the cover ID root as well. Okay. So now for each book, I'm checking if the cover ID has something. In that case, I'm going to set the cover ID URL over here to, let me use medium because again, this is going to be a smaller thumbnail. And then at the end of this, I'm going to do book.set cover ID is I'm going to create a private string cover URL. I'm going to mark this as transient because I don't want it saved in Cassandra. I'm going to just do source action, generate getters and setters for the cover URL. And in my controller, I'm going to, for each book, I'm going to put this back here, and then book.set cover URL to be cover image URL. So I have something there that I can show the cover image for, and then I'm going to return book. Okay, so I looked at each book, and then I'm getting the cover image URL so that I can show it in the card over here, right? So this is going to be th:/src, and then the image is going to be book.cover URL, which is, I think, what I call it. Cover URL, yes. Now, what else can I show over here? So I have the book name. I'm going to copy the book tile and kind of use that as inspiration for this, right? So I'm going to go to book.html. I had a bunch of things that I was doing here for the book tile. I can kind of do the same thing. All right, I'm going to get these. We don't have description, but I can use this as an example for printing all the other stuff. I'm going to go back to home and paste this here. We know that this is book name. We're going to show the author names. And then instead of description, I'm going to show reading status. Status. And I guess that should do. Let's see how this looks like. Insert a semicolon in the home controller. Where am I missing a semicolon? Oh, here it is. And I need to connect and put it back, right? I'm not doing that. Just create a separate stream. All right, so I'm going to do a connect of connectors dot to list. Okay. And then I'm going to do books by user equals. Okay. Okay. So we've got the stuff here, which doesn't look very good, but it is something. So this is fine, except for the fact that if the user changes the ratings for the same book as I've done over here, right? I've changed this over time. This book repeats. I don't want that. So what I'm going to do is kind of filter that out in my controller. I can do that by, anyway, since I have a stream here, I can do a dot distinct, which is going to take the first occurrence of something. But what's the first occurrence? Well, this thing has no idea. I'm going to have to tell what makes two books by user the same. And I do that by implementing, you guessed it, the equals and hashcode methods. So I'm going to right click, source action, generate hashcode and equals. I'm going to say if two of these instances have the same book ID and the author ID, then I want you to consider those two as the same. Okay, now I have the equals and hashcode. Now when I do a distinct, it is going to check if it finds one more in the stream with the same book ID and user ID, in which case it is going to just not show it. Okay. Now let me reload. It should basically show the first occurrence of a book and not repeat it if I have been rating the same book multiple times. Refresh. Well, there you go. This is perfect. Just what I wanted. Of course, this doesn't look good. So I'm going to have to style this and make this look a little bit better. Maybe what I'm missing here is the class equals card. And looks like it doesn't even have bootstrap here. So I'm going to copy the bootstrap CSS, paste this to the head. And yeah, this is a bit too big. I know. I'm going to change this to display one. Okay, so this is a little better. I'm going to put this max width back. Style equals, what was the max width that was set over here? This guy. I'm going to put this back, and this looks good. So I'll have reading. Both of them are reading, but the idea is as we kind of like make changes to this thing, it is going to keep this list updated. Okay, so I'm going to add a couple of other things that we're missing here. First of all, the title is missing. And then I should have just copied this from the books.html. I copied it from the wrong starting point. Let's see, title is already there. I'm going to put the container at the top and also include the search funnel. And then inside that, I'm going to have the content. Okay, so content is what's going to start this thing here. I'm going to put this here. Content starts here. My books ends the section. And let's see if there is any other. There is a div container that needs to end. So I'm going to close that div as well. And then I'm going to format this so that I'll know if there is any problems. So this is the top div, which closes at the very end. All right, so let's take a look at this now. Okay, which is not bad. So here are the books that I'm currently reading or have read before. What happens if I get rid of the H1 here? I seem to have an H1 here somewhere. Yeah, I don't need this. So if I were to add another book, okay, if I were to browse and try out another book, let's pick another random book here. So let's start from books by book by ID. Let's take this guy. So if I were to go to that book and start reading this, all right, so I'm going to say reading is, well, or maybe call it finished. We're going to have to handle that too, right? If something is finished, then we have to move that towards the end, all right? So I'm going to say submit rating 4, submit, all right? If I go home, this thing shows up at the top even though I have finished reading it. So we're going to have to fix that. One way to fix this is by having that as a source of sorting in the book by user model. All right. So if we go to this model here, this one's marked as descending, right? But the status is not a clustering column. The reading status is not a clustering column. So I can put that as a clustering column as well. Okay. So I can put this guy here and make this a clustering column and get rid of this. Now, since this is clustering column, I can specify an order to this thing. Now, what are the status that we do have in our HTML? We are sending 0, reading, finished, did not finish. Okay, so one way we can do this is by specifying an order to this. So, for example, I can say currently reading is 0. Okay, 0 dash currently reading. Finished is 1 dash, and then did not finish is 2 dash. Okay, and status I'm going to select is 3. Right. Let's try this out and see how this works. Which basically means I'm going to have to clear out all the existing data. All right, so I'm going to go over here, and then I'm going to do drop table books by user, so we can recreate that. I don't want the old data to be there because we are not using those values there. Remember, this is something you can do just once, right? Once you have your application all available and people are using it, then you're going to have to do some kind of a data transformation script to migrate over the data. But this is fine for now. I think it's dropped. Select star from books. No, yeah, it's not there. Books by user isn't there, which is good. Now I can recreate that data. But now, before I do that, let me fix this thing. Now that I have that, I can say ordering dot ascending so that it is going to sort in that order. All right. So when I save some, when I'm fetching something back, it is going to be in the order of like whatever is reading is going to show up first, whatever is finished is going to show up next, and whatever the user didn't finish is going to show up over here. All right. And whatever the user hasn't provided a status for is going to show up at the very end, which is fine. Again, this is a design choice. You can pretty much do it however you want. I'm going to stop and then run this. Okay, there is nothing right now. I'm going to go to the book here and then refresh, pick this stuff, currently reading, submit. Now, if I go home, I see that there it is showing 0 reading. So we can fix that. We can go back and then pick another book. Let's take this one. Okay, I'm going to mark this as finished, and then we can end date. Rating, this doesn't matter. Now, if I go back to home, see, the currently reading one shows up first. The finished one shows up afterwards, which is what we want. Here, I'm going to go to home.html, and I'm going to map the reading status to a specific value. So the way to do that is by adding a switch here, and you can do that in timed. So I'm going to put a div th:/switch equals, and within this, I'm going to have the value, which is book.reading status. I'm basically going to copy this. And then each one of these is going to be a case inside that, right? So this is going to be th:/case. And then the value is going to be inside single quotes, which is 0 dash reading. And then I don't need th text anymore. I'm going to say currently reading. All right. And I'm going to copy over the other values. 1 finished, 2 dash DNF. Okay. So this is going to be 1 finished, 2 dash DNF, finished, did not finish. And then I'm going to close the case here. All right. Let's see if this works. refresh, and now I see the correct status being printed. So to summarize, we did a couple of things. First, we went to the book.html and we added the value to be somewhat sortable, because right now, without the prefix that we had over here, there's really no way to sort these things, right? So we kind of added this additional semantic, which is sortable. And then next we went to books by user, and we added the status as a clustering column, right? We marked it as a clustering column so that it can be sorted. And then we set sort order to be ascending, all right? When we do this, we are going to get the sort order that we want according to our requirements. What was our requirement? Our requirement was to show any book that the user is currently reading at the top and everything else at the bottom. So now that we have that, the last thing that's left to do is to show something which is more meaningful rather than 0- reading. So which is why we have this time leaf switch, which takes that reading status with that extra stuff that we've added in book.html, all this stuff. We're going to take that and then map it to something which is more user-friendly, right? So I'm going to say currently reading, finished, or did not finish, okay? Now we can add a rating here as well. This is going to be the rating paragraph. And then inside this, I'm going to put a span. And then the span is going to repeat for as many times as there is rating. Rating in, what do we call it? Just rating. But this is not looping through rating. This is not a list. It basically needs to loop through a fixed list from 0 to whatever is the rating. Like if somebody is rated 4 stars, this thing has to happen 4 times. And for me to do that, I need to use this construct called a sequence. I do something like this: numbers.sequence. I'm creating a new sequence of 0 to book.rating. Okay. There's a sequence that I'm creating. And now I want this to loop as many times as there is book.rating. So let's say somebody is rated 4 stars, right? This has to loop from 0 to 4. So each time rating is going to contain the value of 0, 1, 2, 3. Actually, it should be -1. Okay. And now here, I'm going to just print the star character that we have over here, which is this guy. So it's going to print a span of that many stars. Refresh. And now I see these many stars. This is something that I can kind of click and link to as well. So let me do that so it makes it easy for me to navigate to that point. So I have get rid of alt here. This is the name, right? So this name can be a link. I'm going to go here to the search page and pull up this thing here, which is kind of what I want. So I'm going to go to home.html. I don't know if a href works for h5. It probably doesn't. So I'm going to have to create a link here. Make this a, and then href is /books/ this is going to be book.id. I think it's ID. Let's find out. Is it book ID? It is book ID. All right. Book ID. See if this works. Okay. Seems to be working. Of course, we have to fix the styling, but it takes you there. All right. So I've made it 4 stars. I'm going to make it 3 and test if it works. Okay. That seems to have broken it. So when I make the starting tag as A, I need to make the closing tag as A as well. I'm going to test it one more time by changing it to 1 star, submit, and go back to home. It has 1 star. All right. So we have kind of like the basic dashboard page available. So here are all the books that the user has read. As they read more, this is going to increase, and then it's going to always sort based on how the user is updated, when the user updated it, as well as if it's a book that's currently being read, as opposed to something that's already finished. So for example, if I were to change the date over here, since it is a finished book, it is not going to go to the top, right? It's still going to stay here. Currently reading is still going to be on the top, which was the requirement. And that's how we have managed to satisfy that requirement. In the next video, I'm going to make a few more changes to the way the navigation flow works. So for example, when somebody is not logged in, we want to have a nice experience. The basic login page we have is not very elegant. And also when you come to the book page, if somebody is not logged in, we just don't show anything. We'd like to show some way for them to kind of log in after the fact and add the user's information there if you want to rate it or add the start and end date, right? So we'll check that out in the next video.